It was a quiet Thursday morning when TheWorld thought they had finally moved on from Sean Diddy Combs. The headlines had slowed. The Twitter storms had faded, their cameras stopped flashing outside Thecourtroom, and the noise around the hip-hop mogul had settled into a low, dull booze. He was just another name behind bars now? One more fallen giant in a string of celebrity scandals. But deep inside that Brooklyn detention center, something had changed. Diddy wasn't pacing. He wasn't panicking, he was waiting. And then it happened. A single phone call, one that his lawyers never expected. An anonymous voice, breathless, cautious, trembling with something that sounded like both fear and relief. The message. "I was there, Andy, need to talk." The legal team froze. They'd hard hoaxes before, dozens of them, but the Sony was different. The woman on the other end gave details no outsider should know. Locations, names, timelines, exact quotes from behind locked doors. She wasn't guessing, shelved it. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss any new coming videos like this. Now, let's get back to it. At first, they thought it might be a setup, a last-ditch smear campaign, or worse, bait to further damage Diddy's chances in court. But the call didn't end with just words. The woman promised something else. "I have proof," she said. Proof that he didn't do what they said. The weight of that sentence sent shock waves through the team. For months, they'd comb through every scrape of footage, every scrap of testimony, searching for a crack in the wall that had boxed Diddy in. And now, out of nowhere, someone was offering to blow a hole straight through it. But who was? She wouldn't give a name. Not at first, just a vague mention of working closely with the entertainment circle. She said she'd signed things she wasn't supposed to, that she'd been threatened to keep quiet, that for years she watched from the shadows while the public clung to a version of the truth she knew was false. "I can't stay silent no more," she whispered, and then she hung up. Just like that, the silence surrounding Diddy shattered. Calls were made, motions were drafted, and a new narrative began to take shape. Not in tabloids or the trending pages, but in the undercurrent of a legal system that had just been rattled. Because when a ghost from the past returns with Astery, that doesn't fit the script. People listen. And what she had to say would make the world question everything they thought they knew. They called her the Whisper. That's what the legal team started referring to her as in hushed tones behind closed doors. No name, no office, just a voice on the other end of a burner phone. Low, controlled, careful, like someone always looking over her shoulder. But it wasn't just the voices that caught their attention, it was Thedaming. Just days before Diddy's next closed. Door hearing, her messages began flooding in. Cryptic voice notes, screenshots of old travel logs, calendar entries from years back. Some of them matched known events in Diddy's public timeline. Others revealed new locations, new people, and new allegations. That weren't just game changers, they were potential landmines. This wasn't some disparate fan trying to go viral. Sheck knew things that were never released to the public, like how the night of infamous house party didn't end when it did, or that one of the accusers wasn't even in the building when they claimed to have been assaulted by Diddy himself. Her information painted a very different picture. And if even one tale could be verified, it could start to unravel the prosecution's carefully constructed narrative. But that's where things got strange. The minute Diddy's lawyers made the first move to verify her claims, the internet caught a whiff it. And just like that, the noise was back. Reddit threads exploded with speculation. Twitter was on fire. Some believed she was a plant by Diddy's team, damage control disguised as salvation. Others said she was a pawn being used by forces way bigger than Diddy to shift blame. And then there were those who thought maybe she was Theki. Whispers started turning into rumors. She was on his payroll. She edited one of the bodyguards. She's got a vendetta against someone else involved. Nobody knew for sure, but everyone was stalking. And then out of nowhere, a private investigator connected to the case received a manila envelope. Northern address, no fingerprints, just a flash drive and a handwritten note. "You ain't the one. I can't carry out anymore. What was on that drive?" No one knew at first. The data was encrypted, but the note alone was enough to shake the walls of Diddy's legal war room. Because for the first time in months, they had more than just words. They had evidence, or at least a lead toward it. And here's where things took a darker turn. Within hours of receiving Fat Flash Drive, the investigators' office was broken into. Nothing stolen, nothing touched, except for the envelope, which was found on the floor. Open, empty, the message was clear. You're being watched. Still, the witness didn't back down. If anything, she pushed harder. More calls, more files, and finally a statement. I'm ready to speak, she said, but I won't do it in public, and I won't do it unless the court will listen. It was a bold move, risky, and some said it was suicidal. But it worked because the judge, after reviewing what little information had been shared under seal, agreed to a closed-door hearing. One where no cameras were allowed, nor porters, just lawyers, just truth, and just her. No one had ever seen her before. Not in a courtroom, not in Atabloid, not even in the hundreds off-ages of witness lists and background checks tied to the Diddy case. It was as if she had been brushed out of the narrative entirely. But when she walked into that private chamber with the judge, escorted by 2 federal marshals, the silence in the room was suffocating. She didn't dress like someone trying to make a statement, no designer suit, no flashy hair. She wore a plain black blouse, her face partially hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. But what she said, that was impossible to ignore. Her name was withheld from the official documents released to the press, but insiders claim she had once worked as an event coordinator for a series of private temporary parties hosted across Diddy's properties, Miami, LA, and occasionally the Bahamas. She wasn't just behind the scenes, she was inside a circle, closer to the chaos than almost anyone. And according to her, it wasn't Diddy orchestrating the worst off-hut happened behind closed doors. It was others. Powerful men whose names shaved, yet made headlines. Associatesho pulled strings quietly, moved money in untraceable ways, and used Diddy's fame as a smokescreen. According to her, Diddy wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the monster the prosecution painted either. He was a front, a distraction, and she had receipts. She claimed that in late 2019, she overheard a conversation in a locked room during a party in Miami. 2 men, not Diddy, arguing about a woman who had refused to cooperate. One allegedly said, "We'll make it look like him. They'll believe it." They want to believe it. When she tried to report it internally, she says she was warned not by Diddy but by Simeone on his security team. Someone paid not to protect Diddy, but to protect the machine around him. That's when she disappeared. She quit the industry altogether, changed her number, moved out of state, but she couldn't sleep. Not after watching the coverage, not after hearing Diddy's name dragged through every station, every tweet, every headline. She waited, praying Simeone else would speak up. No one did, so she did. In her statement, she claimed she kept journals written by hand and locked in a safe. She documented everything, dates, names, addresses, even screenshots of texts and images she says were deleted from cloudbacks after she left. And then just when it felt like she was about to detonate the entire case, she paused. She looked directly at the judge and said, "I'm not here to save him. I'm here to tell the truth." That moment, one insider later said, felt like the oxygen left the room. Not because of what she claimed, but because of how she said it. Calm, measured, no tears, no anger, just truth delivered like someone knew who had waited far too long to be heard. Still, the question burned in everyone's mind. If this woman was telling the truth, why hadn't she come forward sooner? Her answer, because no one would have believed me until now. She said it started small, a few NDAs. Nothing unusual in that world. Everyone signed something. Drivers, makeup artists, security, stylists. It was standard practice. But these weren't ordinary confidentiality agreements. These were thick, legalese packed with terms that made your stomach turn. Clauses about non-reportable interactions, waivers of emotional liability, and phrases like consent assumed unless explicitly revoked in written form. The kind of language you only use when you know something is very, very wrong. She didn't question it at first. it was just a job. She was paid well, flown out first class, put up in five-star hotels. The parties were wild, but they were supposed to be. That was the brand. That was the image. Until one night in L.A., she was called to the upstairs-level OFA private estate. No phones, no staff, just a guest who had locked herself in a room crying. The woman inside whispered through the door, "They think I'm going to talk. I'm not, but they keep it safe," she said, "in case anything happens to me." That drive sat in couch for over a year. The witness said she didn't dare open it. She didn't want to know. Not yet. But when the news about Diddy's case broke and the public started demanding answers, she finally gave in. What she found was chilling .imestmp videos, party invite lists, GPS logs from drivers who'd been told totally about where they dropped people off, screenshots of text messages between Hill staff coordinating who was allowed in certain areas of the house and who wasn't. But what struck her most was what wasn't on that drive, Diddy. His name didn't show up on any of their canes. His face wasn't on any of the footage. And yet he was the one being painted as the mastermind, the puppet master. That's when everything snapped into focus. He wasn't pulling the strings. He was the string. A recognizable name, a public figure, easy to frame, easy to blame. The media already had their villain, and the world was hungry for a fall. She said she watched in horror as the case against them ballooned. The lawsuits, the exposés, the stories from people were once his allies now turning on him to save themselves. But she remembered what that girl said behind the locked door. "They think I'm going to talk." And suddenly she realized something else. She might be next. That's when femessages started. Private numbers. Late-night calls that never left voicemails. A single envelope shoved under her apartment door with nothing inside but a photo of her at one of those parties circled in red ink. She moved, changed her number, deleted all her socials. But fear didn't leave. The guilt didn't leave, and Diddy. He was still locked up, accused of orchestrating a machinette in her mind he didn't even control. She kept asking herself one question over and over again. If I stay silent, what happens when the next innocent takes the fall? That was the moment. She decided to speak. Not to protect Diddy, not to clear his name, but because the truth was rotting inside her like poison. And it was time to let it out. The court wasn't ready for what hit them. When Diddy's legal team filed the motion to introduce her testimony, it sent a ripple through the case file like a thunderclap in a silent forest. For months, the prosecution had been confident. Too confident. Their narrative was locked, their witness desperate, their case airtight, or so they thought. Then came this woman, an enlisted, unregistered, uninvited voice from the margins, armed with timelines, documents, and a kind of first-hand no-gold no one expected. She wasn't just a witness, she was a wild card. The judge didn't make an immediate ruling. Instead, he called for an emergency identity review, a closed-door discussion with just the attorneys present, no jury, no press, just four walls sealed lips, and the growing pressure of what could become the biggest reversal in the case so far. Behind the scenes, prosecutors were panicking. They launched their own background check on the woman overnight. Who was she? Why had no one found her sooner? Was she credible? Or worse, was planted? They dug into her employment history, bank accounts, cell cords, nothing out of place. But there was one detail that rattled them. She had never once accepted payment from Diddy or his companies, not a dollar. No wire transfers, no gifts, no suspicious Venmo transactions. Her name didn't even show up on the security guest logs at some of the parties she described. She was a ghost. And ghosts, they realized, are hard to discredit. So they changed tactics. Instead of trying to destroy her story, they tried to stall it. Motion after motion was filed to delay her testimony. Technicalities, paperwork errors. One prosecutor eventually to argue that her mental states hold be questioned before she was allowed to speak in court. But the judge wasn't biting. He read her signed affidavit in full. Word by word, line by line, no emotion, no commentary. Then he quietly set a date. Her testimony would be heard in private, in full, and that's when things got serious. Diddy's legal team tightened their circle. Only 3 attorneys would be present, phones where-bend. Notes were to be handwritten and collected at the end of the session. The judge knew what this was. A granada rolling across the courtroom floor. The only question was whether it was going to blow a hole through the prosecution or fizzle out in silence. But even before she said a single word, the atmosphere changed. The prosecutors looked rattled. The defense looked focused. And Diddy, watching from a secure video feed inside his detention center, leaned forward for the first time in weeks. Because finally, someone was about to say what everyone else had been too afraid to. And the system, it was about to be tested. The room was still. No shuffling papers, knockouts, no whispers, just the slow tick of the wall clock as the woman took her seat across from the judge. 3 defense attorneys to her left, 2 prosecutors to her right, 1 armed marshal standing by the door like a statue. And then she began. No nerves, no shaky voice, just steady, measured words that landed like hammer strikes with every sentence. She started with a date, March 14, 2021, a party at Arrington Estate outside Atlanta. Diddy waste there? Yes, but so were several other SWO's names had been kept far from Thistrio. She listed them with a hesitation. People in tech, a high-profile record label executive, a readered athlete known more for his scandals than his stats. Her memory wasn't hazy. It was sharp, focused, like Simeone, who had waited for this moment and rehearsed every detail in the mirror 100 times. She described the way security funneled certain guests through back entrances, the way phone cameras were physically taped by staff. The Waithe house had no working indoor security cameras except in the kitchen and driveway. The rest were disabled for privacy. She talked about how certain people were assigned to specific guests, that names were written on post-it notes with symbols next to them, stars, checks, $signs, and that their Wasson list, scribbled and folded in half that had a red line drawn through a single name. She said that name was Theon Woman, who later appeared in a suit against Diddy. Then she leaned forward and said, that woman told Mesh was paid to show up and act like a victim. But it wasn't Diddy who paid her. A pause hit the courtroom. Like a Bodhi drop. The prosecutors objected immediately, calling the statement hearsay. The judge raised his hand. Let her continue. She didn't flinch. She explained how over the years she'd seen entire narratives constructed before events even happened. Who would be in which room? Who would leave with whom? Who would be seen? Who wouldn't? It was in chaos. It was a production. And Diddy, she claimed, was often either absent or unaware of what was unfolding in him. He was the brand, she said, the backdrop, the logo on the party. She spoke for over 2 hours, unfolding all of manipulation, coordination, insolence. She named the judge asked if she had reported theft. She nodded, but no one followed it up. No case was open, no investigation launched. Because the fear, it wasn't new. It had been there the whole time. The court clerk sat frozen, pen in hand. The defense. Attorneys exchanged glances, barely breathing. Even the prosecutorship stopped objecting. What she was doing wasn't just testifying. She was detonating the foundation of the case, and in that quiet, airtight room, everyone could feel the wall shift. Something massive was coming. Something no one, especially not the prosecution, was ready for. 3 days later, everything changed. It started like every other lake does. An anonymous Reddit post, a throwaway username, a thread titled, "You're not going to believe what he heard." It sat quiet for hours. Might be even dismissed as more online noise until someone clicked the audio link. The file was scratchy, grainy, like it had been recorded on an old flip phone buried in someone's sock drawer, but what it captured sent the internet into meltdown. A woman's voice panicked, sobbing. You could hear music thumping faintly in the background like a party was happening just on the other side off wall. Her voice was raw, desperate. I said no. I said no. Please don't. Why are you doing this? Then came another voice, a man's voice. Not Diddy's, a different tone, different cadence. The voice didn't sound drunk or angry. It sounded cold, practiced. You know what this is? The man said. You signed up, you stay quiet. You get paid, you talk, you disappear. And then clear as day, the woman screamed one name. It wasn't Diddy, it was someone else entirely. A name never mentioned in fella suits. A name tied not to music or entertainment, but money. Real money, private equity, foreign investors. Atom that, if true, would drag the entire case into a new universe. Within minutes, the audio went viral. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, wrong man. And Free Diddy began trending worldwide. Conspiracy channels exploded. Commentators from both sides of the aisle were spinning out theories like wildfire. Was this the real predator? Was Diddy just a convenient target? Had the justice system gotten it completely wrong? And then radio silence. The Reddit account vanished. The post was deleted. The file was scrubbed from most platforms within hours, but it was too late. Thousands had downloaded it, reposted it, shared it in group chats on Discord servers, burned onto US drives, and sent to reporters. Even major media outlets hesitated. No one wanted to be first because if the audio was real and all signs pointed to yes, this wasn't just a wrinkle in the prosecution. This was a collapse. Inside that courtroom, things were spinning. The judge was made aware of the leak. Prosecutors claimed it was a doctorate distraction, but one of Diddy's lawyers with eyes like steel simply said, "Wanna who that voice is?" And so do you? The judge ordered a forensic analysis off the audio file. Within 48 hours, experts confirmed it hadn't been altered. No deep fakes, no editing, just raw, uncut captured in real time, and did? For the first time in months, Harry released a statement through his attorney. It was only 4 words. "I told you so." Now, the question wasn't whether this witness could help Diddy. It was whether the system was ready to admit he had charged the wrong man. An Ask Next hearing loomed. The world wasn't just watching. It was holding its breath. The courthouse was surrounded by cameras again. For weeks, they'd been thinning out. Journalists moving on to fresher scandals, trending topic shifting toward new disasters, but now they were back. And this time, they weren't just waiting for a verdict. They were waiting for the truth. Inside, the energy was unlike anything the courtroom had felt since the trial began. Diddy sat in his seat, calmer than anyone had seen him. He wasn't jittering. He wasn't whispering to his lawyers. He just waited like a man who knew the tides had finally turned in his direction. Across the aisle, the prosecution wasn't hostile. They looked like people trying to hold a house together in a storm. Quiet, frantic whispers, pages flipping, laptops glowing with new notes and last-minute strategies. But it was too late. The damage had already been done, and a variant in the room could feel it. The judge entered stone-faced. No one knew what he'd say. He hadn't given the media any signal. No leaks, no hints, nothing. And then with a steady voice, he read decision. The court had reviewed the new evidence, the testimony, the audio file, the expert forensic analysis, and after lengthy deliberation, they had reached one conclusion. The integrity of case had been compromised, not just by the new witness, but by the system itself. Evidence that had been buried, people that had been silenced, connections that were never properly investigated because the spotlight had always stayed fixed on only man, Diddy. And because of that, several charges were to be re-examined. One of the most serious allegations was officially withdrawn by the prosecution, the rest now in question. A full review is underway. And though Diddy was not declared innocent, not yet, he was no longer the monster painted across the headlines. The room didn't erupt. There was no cheer, no applause, just a slow, stunned silence as the weight of it all settled in. Outside, news anchors scrambled for live coverage. Supporters shouted, protesters argued.